California's retirement system, known as CalPERS, is coming under fire this week from Indiana Congressman Jim Banks. Banks is calling for the chief investment officer, Yu Ben-Meng, to be investigated for his, quote, long and cozy relationship with China and the fund's investments in Chinese companies. The pension fund defended their employee, saying that in a statement to Fox, saying this: CalPERS investments in Chinese public equity have decreased in recent years to just over 1% of the fund. These are passive investments made through leading independent index providers. The company also said that Meng has their, quote, full and unwavering support. Joining me right now is the man making the charges, Indiana Congressman and House Armed Services Committee member Jim Banks. Congressman, it's good to have you this morning. Thanks very much for joining me once again.
Great to be with you.
So what's your reaction to the response from CalPERS this morning?
Well, first and foremost, this is a deeply oblivious and ignorant response from CalPERS. What we know is that CalPERS, the largest state pension fund in America, invests in almost 300 Chinese companies, a couple of $1 billion in companies like Hikvision, which is a surveillance company in China that they use to spy on the Uyghur Muslim population. They also invest in Chinese companies that are involved in building up their military and specifically their Navy. So what's deeply troubling about this is I, as a member of the House Armed Services Committee, go to my colleagues and beg them to appropriate more money to the American military on behalf of the American taxpayers to build up our Navy to keep up with China's Navy. And at the same time, the largest state pension fund in America, California's pension fund, is investing in Chinese military programs to do the opposite. The taxpayers are getting screwed on both ends on this one.
Congressman, I think you make a really important point here, but isn't it hard to get your arms around this when you actually have the indexes invested in it? For example, over the last 6 months, I was outraged by this idea that the thrift fund, which is the military money, the 401k money of our military, past and present, that $500 billion fund, they want to put 10%, as a proposal, put 10% of that money, $50 billion, into the MSCI index, which is the same issue. They're invested in companies like what you just said, Hikvision, as well as companies that are creating, weaponry for the Chinese government. And we know that the goals of the Chinese government are to overtake the United States in terms of the economy and militarily. So these weapons that our military men and women will be investing in and funding are going to be the weapons that are fighting against us.
There's no question about it. And that's why I wrote a bill in the Congress earlier last year, and I've reintroduced it this Congress, that would reverse that thrift savings plan rule to not allow for those investments to occur. But the reason that I've focused my attention on China is because on California, is because Mr. Meng is a graduate of something called the Thousand Talents Program. And he was quoted in a Chinese language newspaper saying that he has a deep attachment to his motherland and he feels a sense of responsibility and honor to do whatever he can to help his motherland. He's an American citizen born in China, and what we found is that he's made investments on behalf of Chinese government employees in this pension fund and programs that are not in the best interest of America's national security. It's the same, you're right, for the thrift savings plan, but CalPERS is so much more significant in the activities that they're involved with versus the thrift savings plan. But Maria, I'm focused on both of these plans. I imagine that when we look across the country, we're going to find a lot more activities just like what we found with CalPERS.
This is such an important story. That's why we wanted to have you on today, because this is just one more way that the Chinese have this soft hold on America and this soft, sort of targeting of data, information, investing prowess. So tell us about that program, the Thousand Talents, because this is not just as it relates to investment. You've got that talent program throughout business where Chinese nationals are able to get access to highly important and sensitive data that the U.S. has, and ultimately it can be stolen.
This is a program that is funded by the Chinese government, controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, to recruit Chinese nationals or those who, like Mr. Meng said, have a deep attachment to their motherland, to recruit them and put them in highly valuable places. In this situation, putting an individual in charge of investing pension funds for the largest state pension fund in America. It's a concerted effort by the Chinese. That's what's so dangerous about it, and it's why I've called on Governor Newsom, the governor of California, to do something about it. So far, he's been completely silent. Now, we know he's not a very good governor. He completely ignores the poverty issues and the economic issues in his state. The least he can do is take a deep look at what's going on here and do something about it. It's on his watch. President Trump, on the other hand, is the first president in my lifetime to do something about these issues at the national level. So while he's focused on doing his part, we have governors like Governor Newsom that are completely ignoring it.
Well, it's unbelievable. The president has truly changed the conversation around China. And now we also are, identifying these areas where the Chinese have able to get a foothold, whether it's through our capital markets or through technology. The Justice Department filed racketeering charges yesterday against Huawei. Let's talk about this because the DOJ is alleging that Huawei stole intellectual property from at least 6 companies, including Cisco, T-Mobile, Motorola. My audience knew this already because I have been saying this for about 2 years. Huawei refuted the claims completely. I asked the chief security officer about that specifically yesterday, about how there's a list of companies that Huawei has settled with because they've stolen intellectual property. And Andy Purdy sits there yesterday and says, oh, no, we didn't.
Yeah, this is really unbelievable, but we've known for a long time that Huawei is again, a CCP-controlled entity acting on behalf of the Chinese government to steal not just trade secrets, but our important military and intelligence secrets as well. Also, public reports this week of Huawei installing back doors on their equipment to do just that, which makes the UK's decision to allow for up to 30% of their 5G network to use Huawei equipment to look so much more foolish than what it already did. That's why Senator Tom Cotton and I introduced legislation recently to prevent America from sharing our intelligence with countries that adopt Huawei. Now, UK is one of the Five Eyes partners with the United States,
right.
A very important intelligence and military partner with the U.S. So for them to adopt Huawei means that the United States has to do something to retaliate and safeguard our secrets, especially our military secrets.
Of course.
We shouldn't share that with a company that installs Huawei into their 5G network.
Of course, and that's why Secretary Pompeo came on this set over a year ago and said we're going to share less information with them. Bottom line, if they've got a Huawei infrastructure, by the way, Senator Cotton's going to be my guest this Sunday on Sunday Morning Futures, talk about your legislation there. But real quick before you go, the Senate limiting the president's military powers, the body voting 55-45 to force President Trump to seek congressional permission before taking any military action against Iran. Why do this now? 8 Republicans joined their Democratic colleagues to curb the president, including Maine Senator Susan Collins, Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski. I mean, Congressman, is now the time to be doing this to show Iran that the Congress is not behind this president at such a sensitive moment when Iran's every day trying to poke at the United States?
Yeah, well, again, this is a counterproductive effort by the left. It is a slap in the face of this president who's been doing everything that he can to keep us out of war. This would be warranted if the president was taking us into war, but he's doing just the opposite.
Yeah.
I served in Afghanistan just before getting to Congress. I know what it's like to be on a military base in uniform. In this case, I've got to wonder if our troops abroad aren't looking at Congress and wondering why would you tie the president's hands from keeping us safe, which is what this president did when he took out Soleimani, who was planning attacks on our embassies and our bases. That's the type of leadership that we want from our commander-in-chief. To tie his hands is asinine and a very foolish move by those who voted for this measure this week.
Congressman, we're going to be watching your efforts here in terms of China and the rest. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
And Congressman, thank you for your wonderful service to our great country. Congressman Jim Banks joining us there.